Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You are welcome to the class. The topic is approximation. Approximation. Let's start with rounding off numbers. Rounding off numbers. Numbers. Numbers could be rounded off to the nearest tens, hundreds, thousand, and so on to give a good idea about the exact amount. It could be value or measure of items. Numbers can also be rounded up or down. Numbers that can be rounded up are 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, while 1, 2, 3, and 4 are rounded down. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 will be rounded up to the numbers at the front, and while going to that number they become 1. Then it will now be 1 that will be added to the number at their front, not at their back. While 1, 2, 3, and 4 are rounded down. At times you will not even write it, or they become 0. Again, numbers to be rounded up are 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, while 1, 2, 3, and 4 are rounded down. This rounded down number, at times you will not even write it, or they become 0. Let's look at these examples. Examples 1. Round off A 65, B 123 to the nearest 10. A 65, B 123 to the nearest 10. Now here, we are rounding up 65 to the nearest 10. If you look at it very well, the 5 there is the unit, while the 6 is the 10. The 5 is the unit, the 6 is the tens. And you are to round off to the nearest 10. You start from the last digit, the last number, which here is 5. When you check 5 here is units, then the 6 is the tens. You are to stop at that 6. But before you write anything down, you consider the number that follows 6. Here, the number that follows 6 here is 5, which you will round it up. It could be rounded up. You see the illustration there? When 5 is going to 6, it becomes 1. Then down, it becomes 0. When you add that 1 plus 6, when you add that 1 and 6 together, it gives 7. So 65 to the nearest 10 gives 70. I hope you are with me. Let's move to B. We have 123 to the nearest 10. 123 to the nearest 10. You start from the number, the last number. Here, the last number here is 3, which is the units here. The number that follows here from the right here, you have 3, then it's followed by 2, then the first number is 1. So you start with that unit. The next one is tens. You are to stop on that 2 since we are taking it to the nearest 10. You stop at that 2. Then before you write it down, consider the number that follow it, the number that follow immediately, which is 3. We cannot round up 3. We round it down. I've said it earlier that at times it becomes 0, or you will not even write it here. In this case, we are to write it down. If you are talking to the nearest 10, 100, 1000, you are to write it down. And if you are writing those numbers that you are rounded down, if you are writing it, they become 0. So here our 3 becomes 0 because we cannot add it, we cannot round it up to 2. So it becomes 0, you put down the 0, you put down the 2, then the first number, which is 1. So here now, 123 to the nearest 10 gives 120. Now example 2. Let's round off the following to the nearest 100. Let's round off the following to the nearest 100. A. You have 533. B. 3,580 to the nearest 100. When you start from the last number here, you have 3 to be units, then the 3 at the middle is tens, and the 5 is 100. That is where we are to stop since we are taking it to the nearest 100. Then before you write it down, I have said, you consider the number that follow it immediately. Not that you will start rounding up from the back. No, the number that follow where you are to stop. We are to stop at 100. The number that follow it is 3, which is tens. So you consider, is that one that you will consider. The last 3 will become 0. While the 3 at the center, you consider it. Since we cannot round it up to 3, it also be 0. Then you put down your 5. So here, 533 to the nearest 100 gives 500. It gives 500. Now B. 3,580 to the nearest 100. 3,580 to the nearest 100. Since it's 100, we are stopping on 5. The 0 there is units. See the illustration there. Then the 8 is the tens, while 5 is the 100 there. Since we have to stop there, you consider the number that follows. That is 8. You can round up 8. When 8 is going to 5, it becomes 1. And 1 is added to 5, it gives 6. So then, the 0 you bring it down, your 8 also will be written as 0. Then the 5, you have already added 1 to it. That 1 is coming from 8 because you can round up 8. And when it comes, it becomes 1. When you round it up to 5, it gives 6. So 3,580 to the nearest 100 now gives 3,600. 3,600. Let's move to example 3. Let's round off the following to the nearest 1,000. We are rounding it numbers to the nearest 1,000. A. We have 6,203. B. 115,314. Let's start with A there. 6,203. And we are to round it up to the nearest 1,000, which means we are stopping on 6. As we are stopping on 6 now, we consider the number that follow it, which is 2. When you look at the illustration there, the 3 is the unit, 0 tens, 2 is 100 there, while 6 is our 1,000. So we are to stop on 6, which is 1,000 there. But before we can write it down, you consider the digits that follow, which is 2. 2, you cannot round it up. It will be rounded down. It becomes 0. So there, 6,203 to the nearest 1,000 gives 6,000. It gives 6,000. Now let's move to B. That is 115,314 to the nearest 1,000. 115,314. Here, you start from the last digit, which is 4. The 4 there is the unit. The 1 there is the tens. The 3 is the 100. Then 5 is our 1,000. That is where we are to stop. You consider the 3 that follow. You will not start rounding off or start rounding up from the last number. No, it's the number that follow where you are going, which is the 1,000 that you will consider. And here we have 3. It's the 3 that follow 5. We cannot round it up. It will be rounded down. So here it also becomes 0. Your 4 is 0, 1 0, then 3 also become 0. So here now, 115,314 to the nearest thousand becomes 115,000. I hope is clear. Let's now move to decimal numbers. Let's move to decimal numbers. This could be rounded off to the nearest tens, hundreds, and thousands. Numbers in decimal could be rounded off to the nearest tens, hundreds, and thousands. Examples: round off the following to the nearest tens. Let's round off the following to the nearest tens. A 0.15, B 20.04, A 0.15, B 20.04. You are rounding up 0.15 to the nearest tens. It's different from the whole numbers. That you start counting from the units at the back. Here there is no unit. And you start from the numbers that follow the points. You start from the number that follow the points. And here there is no unit. When you see the example 1 there, 0.15 to the nearest tenth. The tenth there is 1. While the 5 is the hundredth. Again, the 1 there is the tenth, while the 5 there is the hundredth. Before you write it down, you consider the number that follows, which is 5. We can round up 5. So when 5 is now going to 1, it becomes 1. Then it will be added to 1. And here you will not write any 0 down. Is that checking? You are not writing anything down. You stop at where you are asked to stop. Here we are taking 0.15 to the nearest tenth. So which means we are stopping on 1. Then we consider the number that follow this one, which is 5, and we can round it up. When 1 is rounded up to this one here, it becomes 2. So 0.15 to the nearest tenth, it gives 0.2 to the nearest tenth. Here example 2, 20.04. 20.04 to the nearest tenth. To the nearest tenth. Yeah. If to the nearest tenth, it becomes 20.0. But here, yes, to the nearest tenth here, 20.04. Here you start from the number that follows that point, which is 0. 0 here is our tenth. Then 4 here is the hundredth. You consider the 4. We cannot round it up. It will be rounded down. So 20.04 now to the nearest tenth becomes 20.0. Now, let's move to the nearest tenths and hundredths, thousands. Round up the following to the nearest tenths, hundredths, and thousand. 1. You have 0.0356 to the nearest tenth. You are to take 0.03567 to the nearest tenth, to the nearest hundredth, and to the nearest thousandth. Then 2. 625.013. 625.013 to the nearest tenth, to the nearest hundredth, and to the nearest thousand. Let's start from 1. That is 0.03567 to the nearest tenth. I told you that you start when you are solving decimal number. You start from the number or the digits that follow that point. Here is 0 that follow the point. The 0 here is our tenth. Before we write this down, let's consider the numbers that follow. Is 3 that follow 0. we consider that 3. It cannot be rounded up. We'll round it down. Not that you start rounding from 7. No, it's the number that follow it. Here, 3 is the number. Let's consider this 3. You cannot round it up. You have to round it down. And when you round it down, it becomes 0. You will not write other 0, 0. No, you leave it. You stop on top on that 10. So here now we have 0.0 to the nearest 10. So our 0.03567 to the nearest 10 gives 0.0. Now to the nearest 100. 0.03567 to the nearest 100. Have said that our 10th starts immediately after the point, followed by the 100th. When you look at it very well, it's 3. That is the 100th here. Then before you put it down, we consider the number that follow it. I've said you are not rounding up from 7. You round it up from that number that follow 3. Here is 5. We can round it up. 5 becomes 1 when it's going to 3. So 1 will be added to 3. It gives 4. To the nearest 100 here is 0.04. I hope you are getting it. Now here, to the nearest 1,000, we have 0.03567. 0.03567 to the nearest 1,000. Immediately after point, the 0 there is the 10th, 3 is the 100th, and 5 is the 1,000th. Before we write it down, let's consider the 6 that follow. We can round it up. When 6 is going to 5, it becomes 1. Then that 1 will be added to 5. So here, 0.03567 gives 0.036 to the nearest 1,000. I hope you are following. Then Roman figure 2. We have 625.013. 625.013 to the nearest tenth here. I told you, you have nothing to do with the whole number here, which is 625. No, you start from the number that follow the point, the number immediately after the point, which is 0. You have to consider 1 that follow the 0, but you have to round it down. So the answer here is 625.0. You will write the whole number also. So here we have 625.0 to the nearest tenth. Now to the nearest 100. Our 0 is the tenth, followed by 1. 1 here is the 100th. We consider 3. We cannot round up 3. We have to round it down. So we leave it. So here now, 625.013 to the nearest 100 give 625.01. Then to the nearest 1,000, we have 625.013 already in thousands. So our answer here is 625.013 to the nearest 1,000. Now, let's round off numbers to the nearest whole number. Nearest whole number. Example, approximate the following to the nearest whole number. When I said approximate, rounding off, still the same thing. Here we have 13.67. 13.67. The whole number here is the 13. Before we put it down, you consider the number that follows. That is the number immediately after point. Here we have 6. We can round up 6. When 6 now is going to 13, it becomes 1. 1 plus 13 will give us 14. So 13.67 to the nearest whole number gives 14. 13.67 to the nearest whole number gives 14 to the nearest whole number. Number 2, 119. 119.3. 119.3 to the nearest whole number. The whole number there is 119. Then you consider that number that follow immediately after the points. Here we have 3. We cannot round it up. It will be rounded down. So our whole number here is 119 to the nearest number. I hope you follow all what I've been saying. So we've come to the end of the class. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Your assignment will be sent to you.